In 1896, I crossed the southern Sahara with a small expedition following a route that did not exist on any map. We traveled by camel from a remote garrison carrying water, instruments, and a single purpose, to confirm whether a lost settlement was real. For days, the desert felt ordinary. Then our guide began avoiding the ground ahead. A line of cut stone surfaced from the sand. The camels refused to rest, and the earth started to tremble beneath our feet. When the ruins finally emerged, it became clear they were not abandoned. So before we continue, please make sure to leave a like and let us know where you're watching from on Late Mysteries. Thanks. I left Tamanrasset in the first week of November 1896, with a map case tied to my saddle and a letter of passage folded inside my coat. The military clerk who stamped it did not look at me twice. He looked at the crates instead. 2 boxes of instruments, 1 box of dry food, 1 of lantern oil, and a narrow iron chest with a lock that belonged to the man who paid for the journey. His name was Morel. He called himself a patron of study and trade. He wore a clean jacket even in the dust and kept his hands soft. He did not ride well, but he forced himself to stay upright because he wanted us to see that he was not weak. He spoke French to me and to the doctor, and he spoke to the guides through our interpreter, never directly. I was there to make a record of the route and to draw what we found. I had been hired because I could measure distances, take bearings, and copy inscriptions without guessing. I had done work along the coast and in the atlas, but the desert was different. The first day outside the town, I already understood I had brought the wrong habits with me. A mistake in the mountains costs hours. A mistake out there costs water. The doctor was named Delmas. He was older than the rest of us and had a calm way of watching people. He carried a small leather bag of tools and powders and treated even small cuts as if they mattered. He did not speak much during the march, but when we stopped, he asked questions about what we ate and how we slept. He watched our tongues when we opened our mouths. He inspected urine in the sand with the same attention he gave to a fever. The third European was a man called Renaud. Morel said he had served in a regiment to the south and knew how to keep order. Renaud wore a sun scarf like the locals, but he kept his rifle as if it were part of his body. He was not loud, he was not cruel, he was tense, and he treated every delay as if it were an insult. I learned early not to argue with him when the wind was up because he took any raised voice as the start of a fight. Our interpreter was a young man named Karim from the north. He spoke Arabic, Tamashek, and enough French to work, and he knew how to soften a question without changing its meaning. He was not a guide. He did not pretend to be. He stayed close to whoever was speaking and watched faces more than words. The guide who led the camels was a Tuareg man named Auckley. He did not like to give his name at first, and Morel insisted, and Karim asked properly, and Auckley gave it as if he were handing over a coin he might not get back. He had a long veil and a short blade at his hip, and he carried himself like someone used to distance. He watched the horizon with a patient stare and could tell which patch of sand had been touched within a day. He did not explain how he knew. He simply knew. There was also a camel handler named Othman, quiet and thin, with a cough that stayed in his chest. He sang under his breath while he worked, not for cheer, but to keep count of tasks. I did not understand the words, and I did not ask. We had 10 camels. 4 carried water skins wrapped in cloth to slow the heat. 2 carried food and salt. 2 carried the crates of instruments. 1 carried Morel's chest and personal bag. 1 carried our tent and spare cloth. We had a small iron stove we never used after the first night because it was not worth the fuel. Morel's purpose was simple when he spoke to us, and complicated when he spoke to Karim. He said there was a place on old caravan accounts that did not fit any known route. Traders spoke of a detour where they could rest among stone walls and find water without drawing from an open well. Some called it a city that died and was covered. Others called it a place of salt and bad air. Morel said he wanted proof that a settlement had existed deeper than the maps showed. He said there might be inscriptions that would be valuable to scholars and to buyers. Delmas had agreed because Morel promised funding for his clinic in Algiers. Renaud agreed because he was paid. Karim agreed because he wanted work and because he had relatives among the desert people. Auckley agreed after a long discussion I did not understand, and after Morel promised gold and a rifle. I agreed because I wanted the work and because I did not like leaving questions open when they were written in ink. On the second day, the ground changed from hard gravel to finer sand with scattered rock. The sun was sharp and the air was dry enough to pull moisture from the mouth. We started before dawn, stopped at midday, and moved again when the light softened. At night, the cold came fast. The first time it happened, I lay awake and listened to the camels shifting in their hobbles. Their breath sounded thick. The stars were bright enough to show the line of the dunes. The third day we found a line of stone set in the sand. It ran straight for as far as we could see in either direction. Not a ridge of natural rock, but placed stones. Some were half buried, some were clean and exposed. Auckley stopped the lead camel and looked along it without stepping closer. Karim asked him what it was. Auckley answered with a short phrase. Karim turned to us. He says it is an old borderline. He says caravans used to respect it. Between who? Morel asked. Karim asked again. Auckley's eyes stayed on the stones. He says he does not know who made it, Karim said. He says if you follow it, you will find nothing good. Morel climbed off his saddle and walked to the stones. Renaud went with him, rifle in hand. I followed because it was my work to record. Delmas stayed back and watched our faces. The stones were worn but not rounded like river stones. They looked cut. I knelt and brushed sand away from one. It had a flat side with a groove. The groove was straight and clean. Morel said, "Mark it." I took out my pencil and sketched the profile. I measured the width of the groove with the edge of my caliper and wrote it down. The stone was warm even through my glove. Renaud said, "We are losing time." Morel ignored him. He leaned closer and ran his finger along the groove. He smiled once, quick, like someone seeing a familiar handwriting. Auckley called out from the camels. His voice was sharp. Karim listened, then answered him, then came to us. "He says we do not camp near this line," Karim said. "He says we cross it and keep moving." Morel looked annoyed. "Tell him we camp when I decide." Karim did not translate that. He said something else to Auckley, softer, and Auckley's shoulders tightened. We crossed the line and continued. The stones fell behind us. The sky stayed clear. The wind stayed low. Yet I felt a change in how people moved. Renaud checked the horizon more often. Othman stopped singing. Auckley walked a little ahead of the lead camel instead of beside it, and he did not look back to see if we followed. He assumed we would. That evening we stopped earlier than planned because one water skin had a slow leak. It had rubbed against a crate buckle. Delmas found it when he checked the lashings. He patched it with resin and cloth, and we set the skin in a shallow pit to keep it cooler. Morel complained about the delay. Renaud watched him, then looked away. Karim sat with Auckley a short distance from the rest of us. I heard their voices, but not the words. When the meal was done, I walked to them with my notebook. I did not want to disturb, but I needed to know what Auckley believed about the stone line. Karim looked up and spoke before I could. He does not like questions tonight. "I only need the name of it," I said. Kareem turned to Aukley and asked. Aukley did not answer at first. He stared past us into the dark where the dunes had turned into a flat black mass. Finally he spoke, brief. Kareem hesitated, then said, "He says some people call it the line of the sealed ground." "What does that mean?" I asked. Kareem asked again. Aukley answered with a longer string of words, then stopped and adjusted his veil as if he did not want his mouth seen. Kareem said, "He says the ground beyond it was closed. People built a place there, then they closed it, not with walls, but with fear." I wrote the phrase as Kareem said it. I did not ask more because Kareem's face had changed. He was not trying to scare me. He looked like someone repeating a warning he did not own. I went back to the main camp. Morel was polishing his compass lens with a cloth. Delmas was writing notes by lantern. Renaud sat with his rifle across his knees, watching the camels. I lay down and tried to sleep. The sand under the blanket held the day's warmth for a while, then let it go. My mouth dried. I took one careful sip from my canteen and closed it tight. Sometime after midnight, a camel made a low sound that woke me, then another. It was not a panic, it was a complaint, like discomfort. I lifted my head and listened. The camels shifted their weight and tugged at the rope. Renaud stood up. I saw him by the starlight, a dark shape moving around the animals. He checked the knots, then walked out a short distance from camp, scanning the dunes. He did not call out. He returned and sat again. In the morning, when the light was still weak, Aukley pointed at the sand near the patched waterskin. There were marks there, not camel prints, not our boots. Small, deep indentations in a line like the track of a stick pressed into the sand at regular intervals. Renaud crouched and touched one with his finger. "Wind," he said. Aukley spoke to Kareem. Kareem listened and then said to us, "He says it is not wind. He says something walked here at night, something that did not sink like a man." Morel laughed once. It sounded forced. "Tell him it is a fox." Kareem translated. Aukley shook his head and said a word that made Kareem glance at me. "What word?" I asked. Kareem answered quietly. He called it a watcher. He says we should move now. We moved before the sun cleared the low haze. Aukley did not let us linger over the marks. He pulled the lead rope himself and set a pace that made the camels breathe hard. Morel argued once, then stopped when he saw Aukley would not answer. Renaud stayed close to the rear camel and kept looking back, as if he expected someone to follow our trail. The land flattened into a broad plain of pale sand mixed with small stones. The surface looked firm, but every few steps the hoof of a camel would punch through into softer powder. My boots filled with grit. The straps of my pack rubbed a raw line on my shoulder. I kept walking because stopping would only make the heat feel heavier. By mid-morning we reached a low area where the sand had been swept away. A sheet of dark rock showed through, cracked into wide plates. In the gaps between plates, I saw thin lines that were not natural fissures. They were too straight and too evenly spaced. Aukley halted and stepped off the rock. He waved the camels around the edge as if it were a pit. Morel rode forward anyway and dismounted on the rock. His face set with the look he used when he wanted to remind us he was in charge. "It is stone," he said. "It is not a curse." Delmas joined him and squatted to inspect the lines. I followed with my notebook and took out my folding ruler. The lines formed a pattern like paving. Some plates had shallow cuts running across them. Others had shapes carved into the surface, worn but still visible. They were not letters I recognized. They looked like a system of marks meant to be read by someone who knew them, not decoration. Morel's voice softened. "This is it." Renaud came up behind us. "How far?" he asked. Morel did not answer. He traced one carved mark with the tip of his finger, then pulled his hand back fast, as if the rock had burned him. He stared at his fingertip, then at the mark again. Delmas noticed. "Are you hurt?" Morel shook his head. "No, it is nothing. Delmas took Morell's hand anyway and examined the finger. "No cut," he said. He looked at the rock. "It is only warm." Ockley spoke from the sand, his voice sharp. Karim answered him, then turned to us with a tired face. "He says the stone is part of a road," Karim said. "He says the road goes to the sealed place. He says we should not step on it." Morell lifted his chin. "Tell him the road is why we came." Karim translated without adding softness. Ockley's eyes narrowed. He said something that made Karim hesitate. "What?" Morell demanded. Karim answered, "He says the watchers follow the road." Renaud snorted and looked away, but he did not step onto the rock. He stayed on sand, boots planted apart. I wanted to argue with my own nerves, so I focused on work. I measured one of the cuts and noted its width. I sketched 3 of the marks in my notebook. While I drew, I felt an odd vibration through my knees, faint but steady. It stopped when I shifted my weight. I stood up and waited, holding still. The vibration returned, a light trembling that rose through the rock. It was not like distant thunder. It had no rhythm. It felt like something moving far beneath the stone. I did not say it at first. I watched Delmas. His eyes were fixed on the rock, his mouth slightly open, as if he were listening with more than his ears. He looked at me. "Do you feel it?" I nodded once. Morell's face tightened. "Feel what?" Delmas tapped the stone with the back of his knuckles. The tapping sounded dull. "Oh, a vibration." Morell stepped hard once. Then again, "I feel nothing." Renaud finally stepped onto the rock with one foot, then pulled it back. His jaw worked as if he were chewing something tough. "I felt it," he said. Karim stayed on the sand and watched us like we were careless children. Ockley pointed along the edge of the rock plain. Ahead, the exposed stone continued in a line that vanished under sand again. It was a route. Straight. Too straight. Morell's excitement returned. "We follow it," he said. Ockley refused. He spoke to Karim without looking at Morell. Karim turned to Morell. "He says he will take you near it, but not on it. He says if you ride the stone, you invite them." Morell opened his mouth to threaten. Delmas cut in first. "We do not need to ride on it. We only need to reach the site." Morell looked as if he wanted to argue with Delmas. Then he swallowed it. "Fine," he said. "We keep it in sight." Ockley led us along the sand beside the rock road. The sun climbed higher. Heat shimmered above the stone. The vibration came and went beneath the surface, faint enough that I could doubt it when it stopped, clear enough that I could not deny it when it returned. In the afternoon, we found the first object that made Renaud stop without being told. A pole stood half buried in sand, angled as if it had been driven into the ground and later pushed by wind. It was not wood, it was metal, blackened and pitted with a ring near the top. Morell hurried to it. "A marker," he said. Ockley spoke again. Karim's voice dropped. He says, "Do not touch it." Morell touched it anyway. He gripped it with both hands and pulled. The pole did not move. He then brushed sand away around its base, exposing a circular plate with holes. It looked like a mount for something larger, now gone. Renaud raised his rifle a little. "This is not old," he said. I crouched and looked closely. The metal was worn, but the shape was precise. The ring at the top was not a crude loop. It was forged clean. Delmas said, "If caravans knew of a city, they did not build this." Morell's eyes flicked to him. "Then who did?" No one answered. The wind was still low, yet sand slid around the pole in small streams, as if drawn by the slightest movement of air. I watched the sand and saw it slip into a narrow gap at the base plate, disappearing like water into a drain. I leaned closer. The gap was too even to be a crack. It was a seam. Ockley made a short sound and turned away, tugging the lead rope. He wanted distance. Othman followed without question. Kareem lingered, looking at the pole with a tight expression. "What is it called?" I asked Kareem, keeping my voice low so Morel would not hear. Kareem hesitated. He has a name for places like this. He says it is a mouth. A mouth for what? Kareem did not answer. He looked toward Auckley and then back to me. He says the sealed place takes what it wants. We moved on. The pole stayed behind us, a slanted black line against the sand. Toward evening, the sky shifted from hard blue to a washed, dusty color. The light turned flat. My eyes stung. The horizon lost contrast. Auckley slowed and raised his hand. He listened. I heard nothing at first, then a faint sound like grains of sand striking cloth. "A wind," Renaud said. Auckley shook his head. He spoke quickly. Kareem translated in a clipped tone. "He says the sand is moving without wind. He says it happens near the sealed ground." Morel glanced at the rock road, which now ran closer to us, its edge emerging again in long, straight stretches. "We are close," he said, as if that was comfort. The sound grew louder. It came in short bursts, then stopped, then returned. It did not match the air. My scarf lay still against my neck, yet the sound of sand on cloth came again, as if someone were throwing handfuls at our packs. Renaud walked to the rear and checked the camels. "No one is throwing anything," he said, then fell silent when another burst rattled against the crate lids. Delmas spoke quietly, almost to himself. "Static movement," he said, then caught my look and shook his head as if he did not want to explain a theory he did not trust. We made camp early because Auckley insisted. He chose a low depression between two ridges, not deep enough to trap us, but enough to break line of sight from the road. He pushed the camels close together and tied them in a tight ring. He then took a bundle from his saddle and placed small stones at measured distances around the camp, forming a rough circle. Morel watched this with irritation. "What is he doing?" Kareem answered. "He is marking the boundary. Tell him we do not need it." Kareem did not translate. He simply looked at Morel and said, "He will do it anyway." That night, after we ate, Morel unlocked his iron chest and removed a rolled paper map and a small notebook. He spread them on a blanket and called me over. Delmas came too. Renaud stayed near the camels, but he watched us from the side. Morel pointed to a mark on the map, a blank area with a pencil dot. "Here," he said, "old notes from a caravan master. He wrote of walls that do not crumble and a water source that does not taste of salt. He wrote of people who did not trade, only watched. He wrote they had lamps that did not burn oil." Delmas said, "Caravan stories grow." Morel's eyes flashed. "Not always. Some grow, some are warnings." Kareem listened from a few steps away. His face was unreadable. I asked, "Why did the caravan master leave?" Morel tapped the map with a finger. He wrote one sentence that mattered. He wrote that the city was not empty, but it was not alive in the way men are alive. Renaud spoke from the camels. "We should turn back." Morel looked up fast. "You are paid to protect, not advise." Renaud's voice stayed level. "I am paid to keep us alive. This is not a fort. We are far from help. We already lost water. Now the sand moves without wind. The guide fears what we cannot see. If we find ruins, fine. If we find people, we trade and leave. If we find something else, your chest of papers will not matter." Morel's face hardened. He shut the notebook and locked the chest with a sharp click. "We go one more day," he said. "If there is nothing, we leave. If there is something, we decide then." No one argued because the argument would not change his mind. I lay down later and listened to the camels again. The night was colder than before. The stars were bright, but the air felt heavy in my lungs, as if the dryness had turned to powder. I slept in short pieces. Each time I woke, I heard the same soft sound at the edge of camp, sand sliding. Not a gust, not a creature running. a steady, patient movement circling. Near dawn, a camel cried out sharp and loud. I sat up at once. Renaud was already on his feet, rifle raised. Oakley stood inside his stone circle, eyes fixed on a point beyond it. I followed his gaze and saw a shape in the gray light. It stood just outside the ring of stones, still as a post. It was tall, narrow, and covered in cloth that hung straight down. No face showed, no hand showed. It did not move when Renaud aimed at it. It did not flinch when the camel cried again. Karim whispered behind me, voice tight, "Do not speak." The shape turned its head a small amount, not toward Renaud, not toward Oakley, but toward the rock road hidden beyond the ridge, as if it were listening to something only it could hear. Then it stepped back once, and the sand around its feet sank without a footprint, as if the ground had opened and closed. The shape was gone, and the spot where it had stood was flat. Renaud fired anyway. The shot cracked the morning and made the camels jerk. The bullet struck sand. Nothing answered. Morel stumbled out of the tent, hair disordered, eyes wide. What was that? No one spoke for a moment. Oakley picked up one of the stones from the circle and held it in his palm. It was wet on the underside, dark with moisture, though the sand around it was dry. He showed it to Karim. Karim's throat moved as he swallowed. He turned to us. "He says we are seen," Karim said. "He says today we reach the place or we die on the road." I tightened my grip on my notebook, not because it would help, but because it was the only thing that felt solid. We broke camp fast. The sun rose behind us as we climbed out of the depression. Ahead, the rock road surfaced again, a dark line cutting the sand straight toward the empty horizon. We followed the road at a distance, close enough to see it clearly, far enough that Oakley would not refuse to walk. The land rose slowly, not in dunes but in long shelves of stone covered by thin sand. The camels struggled more here. Their hooves slipped on exposed rock, and Othman coughed harder each time he urged them forward. The sound beneath the ground returned, stronger than before. It was no longer something I could doubt. It passed through the soles of my boots in short pulses, like pressure changes rather than movement. Each pulse made the camels jerk their heads and snort. Delmas stopped once and placed his palm flat on the sand. He closed his eyes, then pulled his hand away and wiped it on his coat as if the contact bothered him. "This is not natural," he said quietly. Morel snapped. "Everything is natural. We simply do not understand it yet." Delmas did not respond. He walked closer to Karim instead and asked him something in French meant only for him. Karim answered in the same low tone. I caught only fragments, words about old stories, about places where ground was closed by command. Renaud moved to the front and walked beside Oakley, now, not behind. He did not speak to him, but his posture had changed. He held his rifle ready, finger near the trigger, eyes forward. Near midday, we reached a shallow basin where the sand had collapsed inward. The ground formed a wide depression, its edges smooth, as if scooped out. At the center stood stone structures, partly buried but unmistakable. The stone was pale and dense, fitted so tightly that no mortar showed. The surfaces were worn but clean, as if sand had polished them over centuries. Morel let out a breath that sounded like relief. "There," he said. "You see?" Oakley stopped at the rim of the basin. He did not descend. He spoke to Karim with urgency. Karim turned to us. "He says this is the outer edge. He says the city is below. He says the watchers do not like the outer edge being crossed." Morel was already climbing down, sliding on the sand with careless steps. Renaud followed him immediately, cursing under his breath. I went next, more carefully, testing each step. Delmas came behind me. Karim hesitated, then followed. Oakley and Othman stayed above with the camels. The air felt different inside the basin. It was cooler, but not by much. It felt contained. Sounds did not travel far. When Renaud kicked a loose stone, the sound died quickly, as if absorbed. I approached the nearest wall and ran my hand over it. The stone was smooth and cold. I found carvings again, deeper and clearer than those on the road. Lines, angles, repeating symbols. Not decorative, functional. "These are markers," I said without thinking. Morel came to my side. "Of what?" I pointed along the wall. "Paths, boundaries, instructions." Delmas looked at the ground. "There is no debris," he said. "No broken pottery, no refuse. The settlement leaves waste. This place is clean." Renaud scanned the corridors between the walls. Too clean. We moved deeper. The layout became clearer. Rows of low rooms opened onto narrow passages. Some passages ended in steps that descended further underground. Others ended at sealed stone slabs set into the ground, each slab marked with the same symbol. Karim stopped near one and stared at it, his face pale. "I have seen this mark," he said. "Not here. In stories." "What does it mean?" I asked. He shook his head. "It means do not open." Morel knelt anyway and examined the slab. He traced the symbol, then smiled with a tight satisfaction. "This is a closure," he said. "A controlled closure. A system." Renaud grabbed his shoulder. "Get up." Morel pulled away. "Do not touch me." Renaud lowered his voice. "Listen to the ground." We all did. The pulsing vibration had grown stronger. It came in waves now, slow and deliberate. Each wave made a fine dust rise from the seams between stones. Delmas said, "Something is active." Morel stood, eyes bright. "Yes, maintenance or defense." Oakley's voice echoed faintly from above. He was shouting to Karim, calling him back. Karim looked torn. He took a step toward the basin edge, then stopped when Morel spoke again. "We are here," Morel said. "You wanted to translate. Translate this." He pointed to a larger structure at the center of the basin. Unlike the others, it rose higher, a low tower with a flat top. A ramp spiraled around it, half buried but intact. Renaud swore under his breath. "That is not a dwelling." We approached the tower. With each step, the vibration increased. My teeth rattled lightly. My stomach tightened, not from fear alone, but from pressure, like descending too fast. At the base of the tower stood an opening, tall enough for a man to enter without stooping. It was not dark inside. A dull, steady light came from within, white and even, without flicker. Morel stopped breathing for a moment. Then he laughed, short and sharp. "You see? Lamps that do not burn oil." Delmas grabbed his arm. "This is beyond us." Morel shook him off. "This is exactly us." Karim whispered, "We should leave. Now." Renaud raised his rifle and aimed into the opening. "If something comes out, I will fire." Nothing came out. The light remained steady. The vibration slowed, then paused as if waiting. I felt watched again, stronger than before, not from a single point, but from the walls, the ground, the air. I turned in a slow circle and saw movement at the edges of the basin. Shapes stood along the rim, tall and still, spaced evenly. I counted 6 before I forced myself to stop. Karim saw them too. His hands trembled. "They are here." Oakley's voice broke from above, shouting in anger and fear. Othman's cough turned into a panicked gasp. Morel stepped toward the opening. Renaud blocked him. "If you cross that line, I will drag you back." Morel's face twisted. "You are afraid?" "Yes," Renaud said. "And so should you be." The light inside the tower brightened. The vibration returned faster now. The stone under my feet warmed. Delmas spoke with urgency. "This place is not abandoned. It is controlled. We are intruders." One of the shapes at the rim moved. It stepped forward without sound, descending the slope. The sand did not shift under it. It stopped at the edge of the basin facing the tower. Another shape followed. Kareem dropped to his knees. He spoke rapidly in a language I did not understand, his voice cracking. The shapes did not react. Morel's breathing grew fast. "They are guarding it," he said. "They have always guarded it." Renaud lowered his rifle slightly, then raised it again when the first shape descended further, now halfway down the slope. Ockley shouted again, a command this time. I saw him pulling at the camel's ropes, trying to turn them. The shape reached the basin floor. It stood still, closer now. The cloth covering it hung straight, unmoved by air. Where a face should be, there was only darkness. The vibration stopped. The light inside the tower dimmed, then flared bright enough to hurt my eyes. The sound from inside the tower resolved into steps, not echoes. Weight shifting onto stone, measured and slow. Each step matched a pulse in the ground, as if the structure itself were coordinating the movement. Renaud fired. The shot struck the edge of the opening and chipped stone. The sound was swallowed quickly. Nothing rushed out, nothing reacted. Morel shouted at him, "You fool!" Delmas grabbed Renaud's arm. "Stop." The shape at the basin floor turned its head toward Renaud. It did not move otherwise. The second shape stopped on the slope, watching. From the tower opening emerged a figure unlike the watchers. It was broader, its body segmented with rigid plates that reflected the light in flat tones. No cloth covered it. Its limbs were jointed in a way that did not match human movement. It did not walk forward at once. It stood at the threshold, as if assessing. The light behind it dimmed again, settling into a steady glow. Kareem pressed his forehead to the ground. He was still speaking, but his words had become a whisper. I felt a pressure behind my eyes, not pain, but insistence. A sense of direction without sound. I knew where it wanted us to look, toward the road, toward the route we had taken to enter. Delmas staggered slightly and caught himself on my arm. "Do you feel that?" he asked. "Yes." Renaud shifted his stance. The plated figure took one step forward. The ground hardened under its foot, the sand flattening as if compressed. It raised one arm. The arm ended not in a hand, but in a cluster of rigid segments that adjusted their shape. Morel stepped around Renaud before anyone could stop him. "We come to document," he said loudly, his voice shaking. "We are scholars. We mean no harm." The figure did not respond. The watchers remained still. Then the ground between us and the tower changed. The sand sank away, revealing a smooth stone surface rising from beneath. It formed a barrier waist-high, straight and clean. "We are being contained," Delmas said. Renaud cursed and fired again, this time at the barrier. The bullet flattened and dropped. No crack, no damage. The plated figure stepped forward again, now fully outside the tower. The vibration returned, steady and strong. My knees weakened. I dropped to one knee without choosing to. Kareem cried out, "They are closing the path." I turned and saw the road behind us. Where it had been a clear line of stone, sections were sinking, sliding beneath the sand as if pulled down from below. The straight road we had followed was being erased. Morel's face went pale. "They are sealing it again." Ockley's shout carried down from above, desperate now. I heard camels screaming, the raw sound of panic. Then the sound cut off abruptly. Renaud spun toward the slope. "They are taking the camels." The watcher nearest the rim moved again, this time faster. It reached the edge and raised an arm identical to the plated figure's. The sand at the rim hardened into a smooth wall, cutting off our exit. We were trapped inside the basin. Delmas backed toward the barrier that had risen between us and the tower. "This is a system," he said, "not a trap in the human sense." A response. "To what?" I asked. "To presence," he said. "To disruption." The plated figure turned its head toward Morel. The pressure behind my eyes intensified. Images rose unbidden. Not memories, not visions, but information, patterns, movement, a sense of purpose that was not hostile but absolute. Kareem screamed and collapsed onto his side. Blood ran from his nose. Delmas rushed to him, shouting his name. Morel staggered and grabbed his chest. "I understand," he gasped. They were not hiding, they were maintaining. The plated figure raised its segmented arm again. The barrier behind us lowered slightly, not enough to pass, but enough to change the space. The watchers shifted positions, forming a ring. Renaud made a decision then. He ran at the barrier near the slope and threw himself against it. His shoulder struck stone. He fell back hard, breath knocked from him. "They will not let us leave," he said hoarsely. The plated figure moved closer. It stopped a few steps from Morel. The pressure peaked, then shifted. Words formed in my mind. Not sounds, but clear instruction. "Leave now. Do not return." Morel laughed weakly. "We cannot." The instruction came again, stronger, paired with the sensation of closing, of narrowing options. Delmas looked up from Kareem. "It is not threatening," he said. "It is final." Kareem's eyes opened. He whispered, "They let some go." The plated figure turned slightly toward Kareem. The pressure eased for a moment. The barrier near the slope lowered further, forming a narrow opening. Renaud did not hesitate. He grabbed Kareem under the arms and dragged him toward it. "Move," he shouted. Delmas followed, half carrying Kareem. I ran after them. The opening was just wide enough for one person at a time. As I reached it, I felt the stone brush my shoulders, cold and smooth. Morel remained behind. He was kneeling now, his notebook open on the ground. He was writing, hands shaking, but precise. "Come," Delmas shouted. Morel looked up once. His face was calm. "Someone must stay," he said, "to be counted." The plated figure stood beside him, unmoving. Renaud turned back, rage on his face. "You will die." Morel nodded. "This place is not death," he said. "It is order." The pressure surged again, forcing my gaze away. The opening began to close. Renaud dragged me through. The stone sealed behind us with no sound. We were on the slope now, scrambling upward through loose sand. Above, Ockley was running, pulling Othman with him. The camels were gone. The watcher's shape stood along the rim, still and silent. The basin behind us changed. The walls sank. The tower lowered. Stone disappeared beneath sand as if drawn downward. Within minutes, the place was a shallow depression again, empty and clean. The vibration faded. The pressure lifted. We did not stop running until the road was gone and the sun was low. We walked until our legs shook and our mouths burned. Ockley did not stop until the light thinned and the ground rose into broken stone that slowed us whether we wished it or not. Only then did he halt and turn, scanning the horizon behind us. There was nothing to see. No basin, no road, only sand and rock, undisturbed. Renaud lowered Kareem gently to the ground. Kareem's breathing was shallow, his skin damp and cold. Delmas knelt at once and opened his bag, working without speaking. He wiped blood from Kareem's nose and checked his pupils, then pressed his fingers to Kareem's neck and wrist. "He is alive," Delmas said, "but he is injured in a way I do not fully understand." Kareem's eyes fluttered open. He looked at each of us in turn, then past us, searching for something that was no longer there. "They marked him," he whispered. "Who?" Renaud asked. Kareem swallowed. "The one who stayed." Delmas stiffened. "Morel?" Kareem nodded faintly. "He chose to be counted. They accept those who do not resist." Renaud turned away and kicked at the ground hard enough to hurt himself. He did not cry out. Aukley crouched a short distance away, drawing lines in the sand with a stone. He spoke quietly to Othman, who sat with his head down, coughing into his sleeve. Their camels were gone. All of our extra water was gone with them. Aukley finally looked at us. He spoke to Kareem slowly, carefully. Kareem translated, his voice weak. He says the sealed place does not kill without reason. It keeps. It watches. When too many come, it closes. When one stays, it balances. That is nonsense, Renaud said, though his voice lacked force. Aukley answered before Kareem could. His tone was sharp. Kareem translated again. He says the desert remembers paths. It also remembers boundaries. We crossed one that was not meant to open. Night fell hard. We had no tent. The cold came fast. We huddled close, sharing what little water remained. No one spoke for a long time. I kept seeing Morel kneeling by the tower, calm and focused, as if he had finally found a place that fit him. The memory did not fade when I tried to push it away. Before dawn, Kareem woke screaming. Delmas held him until the shaking stopped. Kareem could not explain what he had seen. He only said the word counts again and again until his voice failed. At first light, Aukley told us the route we would take. It was not the way we had come. He refused to cross the old road's line again. He would take us wide, even if it cost days. Renaud did not argue, neither did I. The march back was harder than the way in. The land resisted us. Sand shifted underfoot. Heat rose earlier each day. Othman's cough worsened. On the second day, he collapsed and could not stand again. Aukley knelt beside him and spoke quietly. Othman shook his head and pressed something into Aukley's hand, a small carved token I had never seen. Aukley closed Othman's fingers around his own blade for a moment, then stood. "We cannot carry him," Renaud said, voice flat. Delmas did not look up. "I know. Othman died before noon. We covered him with stones and moved on. No marker, no prayer spoken aloud. On the fourth day, we reached a place where the sand gave way to gravel and scrub. On the fifth, we found the track of a caravan. On the sixth, we saw smoke on the horizon. When we reached the settlement, the people listened without interrupting. When Aukley spoke of the sealed place, the elders nodded and told us we were lucky to have lost only what we did. No one asked about Morel. Delmas treated Kareem for weeks after. Kareem never fully recovered. He lost words sometimes, stopping mid-sentence, as if listening to something far away. He refused to travel south again. Renaud returned to his regiment. I heard later that he requested transfer to a coastal post and never took another desert assignment. As for me, I wrote my report with care. I recorded the road, the stone, and the symbols. I did not record the tower. I did not record the watchers. I did not record Morel's choice. The official response dismissed the expedition as misled by local superstition and environmental stress. My sketches were archived and forgotten. Years later, I met a trader who spoke of a straight line of stone that appeared after storms and vanished again. He said some guides refused to cross it even when paid well. I did not correct him. In addition to it, he claimed even though it was easy, people who went from Amo cleared the plane on the throttle. They voltage again, didn't shaking, wages do nothing more, no one